Disclaimer: this is a fictional dramatization created for artistic, emotional, and educational storytelling purposes. All characters and events are entirely fictional and created using AI tools. No impersonation, misrepresentation, or harm is intended. The content contains scenes of danger involving child characters. However, no real persons or minors were involved in its production. Grace's Love Stories produces scripted, AI-generated stories that promote, entertain, inspire kindness, and emotional connection. We respect our viewers and strictly adhere to YouTube's policies.
The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, turning the castle grounds into a labyrinth of mud and mist. I could smell it even from the servants' quarters, that heavy, earthy scent that clung to stone walls and made everything feel smaller, darker, more suffocating. Tonight was the lunar gathering, when alphas from every territory converged under one roof to discuss borders, alliances, and wars I would never understand. My job was simple: stay invisible, keep the chambers clean, and never, ever draw attention to myself. I had perfected the art of disappearing. At 19, I had worked in the castle for 4 years, and in that time, I had learned that girls like me, human, pale-haired, with no family name worth mentioning, were meant to blend into the wallpaper. We were the hands that changed the sheets, the shadows that scrubbed the floors, the silent figures who existed only to serve. The wolf shifters who ruled this land barely registered our presence, and that was exactly how I preferred it. Safety lived in invisibility. My mother had been a maid here too, before the fever took her. She used to tell me that kindness was the only inheritance worth leaving behind. Even when they don't see you, she'd whisper while braiding my hair, you see them, and how you treat the unseen says everything about your heart. I carried those words like a secret talisman, though I wondered sometimes if kindness mattered in a world built on strength and dominance. The upper floors buzzed with energy tonight. I could hear it even as I climbed the narrow servants' staircase, my arms aching from carrying fresh linens. Voices rumbled through the walls, deep, commanding, edged with the kind of authority that made my spine straighten instinctively. The lunar gathering brought out something primal in the shifters, something that crackled in the air like lightning before a storm. I kept my eyes down as I passed a cluster of visiting wolves in the corridor, their conversation dying the moment they noticed me. I felt their gazes slide over me with disinterest before resuming their discussion of territory disputes. Good, invisible. I slipped into the chamber I'd been assigned to prepare, one of the guest suites reserved for high-ranking visitors. The room was opulent in a way that always felt alien to me. Dark wood furniture, burgundy curtains thick enough to block out the world, a 4-poster bed that could sleep 3 people comfortably. I moved through my routine with practiced efficiency, stripping the bed, checking the wash basin, ensuring the fire was properly stoked. The warmth felt good against my perpetually cold fingers. I had just finished smoothing the final corner of the bedsheet when I realized I'd gotten water on my uniform. A lot of water. The entire front of my gray dress was soaked through, clinging uncomfortably to my skin. I glanced at the door, locked as I'd secured it upon entering, and made a quick decision. I had a spare uniform in my apron pocket, folded small. I could change quickly, be out of here in minutes, and no one would ever know. I unbuttoned my dress with fumbling fingers, the cold air raising goosebumps on my arms as the wet fabric peeled away. I was halfway through pulling the dry uniform over my head when I heard it. The door opening. My blood turned to ice. "Wrong room," a voice said. Deep, rough, with an accent that marked him as Northern Territory. "I was told 3rd door on the—" He stopped mid-sentence. I yanked the dress down frantically, my face burning hot enough to rival the fireplace. When I finally managed to look up, my heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack them. The man standing in the doorway wasn't just any visiting alpha. He was the Alpha King. I'd seen him only once before, from a distance during a formal ceremony. Tall didn't begin to describe him. He seemed to fill the entire doorframe, his shoulders broad enough to block out the hallway light. Dark hair fell just past his collar, slightly disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. His eyes were the color of amber and firelight, and right now, they were locked directly on me with an intensity that made my knees weak. Everyone knew the stories. Demon Corvinus, the Alpha King who had united the territories through a combination of strategic brilliance and sheer, terrifying dominance. They said he could kill a man with his bare hands before the victim even realized he was in danger. They said he'd never taken a mate, never showed interest in anyone, that his heart was as cold as the northern mountains he came from, and he was staring at me like I was the only person in the entire castle. I'm so sorry, Your Majesty, I stammered, dropping into a clumsy curtsy, my wet dress still crumpled on the floor beside me. The door was locked. I didn't think anyone would. I was just changing because I got water on my... I was babbling, my words tripping over each other in panic. "Stop," he said quietly, and I froze. "Don't apologize." I risked another glance at him. He hadn't moved from the doorway, but something had shifted in his expression. The hard edges had softened imperceptibly, and he was looking at me not with anger or disgust, but with something I couldn't quite name. Curiosity? Confusion? Recognition? "What's your name?" he asked. No one had asked me that in months. "Ilara, Your Majesty. Ilara," he repeated, as if testing how it felt in his mouth. "You work here?" It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. "Yes, Your Majesty. I'm a chambermaid. I was preparing this room for one of the visiting dignitaries. I didn't realize it was your chamber. There must have been a mistake with the room assignments." "There was no mistake," he interrupted, taking a single step into the room. The door clicked shut behind him, and my pulse skyrocketed. "This is my chamber." But I wasn't expecting it to be occupied. The way he said occupied made it sound almost pleasant, as if my presence here wasn't an intrusion but a discovery. I swallowed hard, acutely aware of how I must look, hair falling out of its bun, uniform hastily pulled on, face flushed with embarrassment. Everything my mother had taught me about staying invisible had just shattered in the space of 30 seconds. "I'll leave immediately," I said, bending to gather my wet dress and the soiled linens. "Again, I said don't apologize." His voice was firmer now, carrying the weight of command that made my instincts scream to obey. "And don't leave yet." I straightened slowly, clutching the bundle of fabric against my chest like a shield. "Your Majesty?" He moved closer, and I caught his scent. Pine and smoke and something wild that made my hindbrain recognize him as predator, but he stopped a respectful distance away, his eyes searching my face with an intensity that felt like being read in a language I didn't speak. "How long have you worked here?" he asked. 4 years, Your Majesty. "And in 4 years have we ever met?" I shook my head. "No, Your Majesty. I work in the servants' wing mostly. We don't cross paths with the royal household." "Invisible," he murmured, and something painful flickered across his features. "Of course." Before I could process what that meant, a sharp knock sounded at the door. "Your Majesty?" A woman's voice, crisp with authority. "The council is gathering. They're asking for you." The spell, if that's what it had been, broke. Demon's expression closed off, returning to that mask of cold command I'd glimpsed from afar. But his eyes remained on me for one more heartbeat, and in that moment, I saw something that would haunt me for days to come. Loneliness. Raw, aching, and so profound it made my chest constrict. "I'll be there shortly," he called to the door without looking away from me. Then, quieter, "What did you say your name was again?" "Ilara, Your Majesty." He nodded slowly, as if committing it to memory. "Ilara, with the pale hair." It wasn't a question, but I felt myself nod anyway. "I won't forget," he said, and somehow I knew he meant it. Then he turned and walked out, leaving me standing in the middle of his chamber with my heart racing and the distinct, terrifying feeling that my life had just changed in ways I couldn't begin to understand. The wet dress in my arms had grown cold, but I barely noticed. All I could think about was the way he'd looked at me. Not through me, not past me, but at me. Like I was real, like I mattered, like he'd been waiting his entire life to walk into the wrong room. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay in my narrow bed in the servants' quarters, staring at the ceiling while rain continued its relentless assault on the castle. Around me, the other maids snored softly, exhausted from the endless preparations for the lunar gathering. But my mind wouldn't quiet, replaying those few minutes in the chamber over and over like a melody I couldn't shake. I won't forget. What did that mean? Why would the Alpha King care to remember a chambermaid's name? I'd seen the way powerful shifters looked at humans, when they bothered to look at all. We were temporary, fragile things in their world of centuries-long lives and supernatural strength. Forgettable by design, but he hadn't looked at me like I was forgettable. When dawn finally crept through the small window above my bed, I rose with the others and dressed in mechanical silence. My uniform felt different somehow, as if the fabric itself remembered being seen. Ridiculous thought. I braided my pale hair with practiced efficiency, pinned it tight against my skull, and joined the procession of servants heading to the kitchens for our morning assignments. "You look terrible," whispered Mira, the girl who slept in the bed next to mine. She was 17, dark-haired and sharp-eyed, with the kind of beauty that occasionally caught the attention of lower-ranking wolves. She'd learned to navigate those attentions with carefully crafted disinterest. "Didn't sleep?" "Storm kept me up," I lied. She accepted this with a sympathetic nod. We collected our breakfast, thin porridge and yesterday's bread, and ate standing up, as was custom for servants during high-traffic events. Around us, the kitchen churned with controlled chaos. Cook barked orders while her assistants scrambled to prepare the elaborate breakfast expected by the visiting dignitaries. "Head housekeeper wants you on the 3rd floor again today," Mira said between bites. "Same chambers as yesterday. Someone specifically requested you." My spoon clattered against my bowl. "What?" "That's what I heard." Mira shrugged, oblivious to the panic rising in my throat. "Maybe you did such a good job they want consistency." "Lucky you. 3rd floor beats scrubbing the main hall any day." But luck had nothing to do with it, and we both knew that requests for specific servants were never arbitrary. Someone had asked for me by name, and there was only one person who'd learned my name last night. The 3rd floor felt different in daylight. The oppressive atmosphere of the lunar gathering had given way to a tense, watchful quiet. I passed wolves in the corridors, some sleeping off the previous night's drinks, others engaged in low, serious conversations that stopped when I approached. I kept my eyes down, my steps quick and purposeful, praying I could complete my duties without incident. The chamber, his chamber, loomed at the end of the hall. The door was closed, and for a blessed moment I thought he might be elsewhere, attending to whatever matters occupied an Alpha King's morning. But when I knocked softly and entered with my cleaning supplies, I found him standing by the window, silhouetted against gray morning light. He turned at the sound of the door, and I saw that he looked as exhausted as I felt. Dark circles shadowed those amber eyes, and his hair was even more disheveled than yesterday. He'd removed his formal jacket, leaving him in a simple black shirt that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. "Elara," he said, and my name in his voice did something strange to my pulse. I dropped into a curtsy, eyes fixed on the floor. "Your Majesty, I was told to service your chamber this morning. If you'd prefer someone else, I wouldn't." He moved away from the window, and I heard him settle into one of the chairs near the fireplace. "Continue with your work. I won't disturb you." That was the problem, though. His mere presence was disturbance enough. I could feel his attention on me as I moved through the room, changing the water in the basin, tidying the papers scattered across his desk, adding wood to the fire. Every movement felt hyper-aware, as if my body had suddenly remembered it was capable of being watched. "You've done this a long time," he said after several minutes of silence. Not a question. "Yes, Your Majesty. Do you enjoy it?" The question caught me so off guard I actually looked at him. He was leaning back in the chair, one ankle crossed over his knee, watching me with that same intense focus from last night, as if my answer actually mattered to him. It's honest work, Your Majesty. It provides shelter and food. I'm grateful for it. That's not what I asked." I fumbled with the linens in my hands. No one had ever asked me what I enjoyed. "I suppose I appreciate the solitude," I admitted quietly. "When I'm cleaning, I'm alone with my thoughts. It's peaceful in a way." Something shifted in his expression. A flicker of understanding that felt too intimate for the space between servant and king. "I understand that," he said. The need for solitude in a world that demands constant performance. Before I could respond, the door burst open without warning. 3 wolves entered in a wave of aggressive energy. 2 men and a woman, all bearing the marks of high rank. The woman led them. Her auburn hair swept back in an intricate style that must have taken hours. She wore the deep green of the Eastern Territories, and her eyes were cold as they swept past me to land on Demon. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice dripping false sweetness, "we've been looking everywhere for you. The morning council session is about to begin, and your presence is required." "Then they'll wait," Demon replied, not moving from his chair. "I'm in the middle of something." The woman's gaze finally registered my presence, and her lip curled with disdain. "You're in the middle of watching a maid change your sheets? How fascinating." The 2 men laughed, sharp, cruel sounds that made my skin crawl. I kept my eyes down, my hands still, praying they'd lose interest and leave. "Lady Sienna," Demon said, and ice dripped from every syllable, "you'll speak with respect to everyone in my presence, or you'll find yourself escorted back to the Eastern Territories before nightfall." The laughter died immediately. Lady Sienna's expression froze into something brittle and dangerous. "My apologies, Your Majesty. I didn't realize you'd developed such protective instincts toward the help." "Then consider yourself educated." He stood, and the casual atmosphere evaporated. This was the Alpha King the stories whispered about. Towering, commanding, absolutely terrifying in his quiet fury. "Alara, you may continue your work in peace. Lady Sienna and her companions were just leaving." But Sienna wasn't done. Her eyes narrowed on me with predatory focus. "Alara, is it? How interesting. And tell me, little maid, has His Majesty been entertaining you? Is that why you've been specifically requested?" The implication hit me like a physical blow. Heat flooded my face, and shame followed immediately after. Not because there was truth in her words, but because I understood exactly what she was suggesting, that I was here for reasons that had nothing to do with cleaning. "That's enough." Demon's voice cracked like a whip. "Out. Now." "We're simply concerned for your reputation, Your Majesty," one of the men said smoothly. "You must understand how it looks. An unmated king, alone with a young human woman. People talk. Let them talk." Demon crossed his arms, and I saw the wolf rising behind his eyes. That dangerous feral part that ruled through dominance and fear. "I answer to no one in this castle, not you, not the council, not anyone. Now leave before I make you leave." They went, but not before Sienna shot me a look of pure venom that promised retribution. The door closed behind them with a heavy thud, and suddenly the room felt too small, too charged with unspoken tension. "I apologize for that," Demon said quietly. "Sienna has ambitions that exceed her station. She's been trying to position herself as a potential mate for years." I swallowed hard, still gripping the linens like a lifeline. "Your Majesty, perhaps it would be better if someone else serviced your chambers. I don't want to cause problems." "You're not causing problems. They are." He ran a hand through his hair in a gesture that felt startlingly human. "And I specifically requested you because—" He trailed off, seeming to wrestle with the words. "Because when you look at me, you don't see a king or an alpha or a weapon. You see a person who walked into the wrong room." The honesty in his voice stole my breath. I'd spent 4 years perfecting invisibility, and here was the most powerful shifter in the realm telling me he appreciated being seen. "I should go," I whispered. "The other chambers. Will you come back tomorrow?" The question was soft, almost vulnerable. "I'll make sure you're assigned here, if you're willing." Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous. That visibility in his world was the fastest path to destruction. But when I looked at him, really looked at him, I saw the same loneliness I'd glimpsed last night, vast and aching. My mother's words echoed in my mind. How you treat the unseen says everything about your heart. Maybe it worked both ways. Maybe how you responded when someone finally saw you said something too. "Yes, Your Majesty," I heard myself say. "I'll come back tomorrow." The relief that crossed his face was so profound it made my chest hurt. "Demon, he said quietly. When we're alone, call me Demon. And as I gathered my supplies and left his chamber, I carried his name with me like a secret too precious and too dangerous to examine in the light. The next 3 days fell into a pattern that felt both terrifying and inevitable. Each morning, I climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor with my heart hammering against my ribs. Each morning, I found Demon in his chamber, sometimes at the desk buried in correspondence, sometimes staring out the window at the forest beyond, sometimes simply sitting in silence as if the weight of his crown had grown too heavy to carry standing up. We talked. Not at first. Those initial visits were marked by careful distance, him working while I cleaned, the only sounds the crackle of fire and the whisper of fabric as I moved through my duties. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, words began to fill the silence. Small things at first. Observations about the weather, comments about the castle's history, questions about my work that seemed genuinely curious rather than patronizing. He told me about the northern territories where he'd been raised, where winter lasted 8 months, and wolves ran wild through forests so ancient they had their own magic. I told him about my mother, how she'd sung while she worked, how she'd made even the smallest tasks feel meaningful. He asked about my life before the castle, and I found myself sharing memories I'd kept locked away. The small cottage we'd lived in, the herb garden my mother had tended, the way she'd braided flowers into my pale hair during summer festivals. She sounds remarkable, Demon said one afternoon, his voice soft with something that might have been envy. My mother died when I was young. I barely remember her voice. I'm sorry, I whispered, pausing in my work. Don't be. It was a long time ago. But the way he said it suggested time did nothing to heal certain wounds. My father raised me alone. He was not a gentle man. He believed affection made wolves weak, that ruling required absolute dominance with no room for softness. I understood then, with sudden clarity, why loneliness lived in his eyes like a permanent resident. He'd been trained from childhood to stand apart, to view connection as vulnerability, to measure worth in strength rather than compassion. Do you believe that? I asked before I could stop myself. That affection makes you weak? His amber eyes found mine across the room. I used to. Now I think perhaps the opposite is true. That it requires more strength to let someone see you than to hide behind walls of power. The air between us felt charged, heavy with meaning I was afraid to examine too closely. But the castle noticed. Of course it did. Mira pulled me aside after breakfast on the 4th day, her face tight with worry. People are talking, Alara, about you spending so much time in the Alpha King's chambers. I'm just doing my job, I protested, even as shame heated my cheeks. I know that. You know that. But Lady Sienna has been spreading rumors. Mira glanced around to ensure we were alone, then lowered her voice. She's telling anyone who'll listen that the king has taken a human plaything, that you're using feminine wiles to climb above your station. Some of the other maids are starting to believe her. The betrayal stung more than I wanted to admit. I'd worked alongside these women for years, shared meals and small confidences, and the exhaustion of long days. And now they thought I was, what? Seducing the Alpha King for personal gain? What should I do? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Mira squeezed my hand. Be careful. Sienna doesn't just spread rumors. She acts on them. She's powerful, connected, and she's wanted the king's attention for years. You're standing in her way, whether you intend to or not. That night, I lay awake again, wrestling with the impossible situation I'd stumbled into. The smart thing would be to request reassignment, to disappear back into invisibility where I belonged. But the thought of not seeing Demon again, of not hearing his stories, or watching his rare smiles, or experiencing those moments of genuine connection, made something in my chest ache with unexpected grief. When had he become important to me? When had our careful conversations evolved into something that felt dangerously close to friendship? When had I started thinking of him as Demon instead of the Alpha King? The answer came 2 days later, during the afternoon I would later think of as before everything changed. I entered his chamber to find him standing at the window, tension radiating from every line of his body. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Not rain this time, but something darker, more ominous. The air itself felt wrong, charged with a threat I couldn't name. "Demon?" I said softly, forgetting protocol entirely. "What's wrong?" He turned, and the expression on his face stopped my heart. Fear, raw and unguarded and absolutely terrifying on someone who was supposed to be the strongest among us. "There's been an attack," he said, "on the southern border. Rogues, wolves who've rejected pack law, who answer to no alpha. They're moving north, and they're not just raiding. They're destroying everything in their path." I set down my cleaning supplies with trembling hands. "How many?" "Dozens, maybe more." He crossed to his desk, where maps lay spread across the surface, marked with red ink that looked too much like blood. "The council is demanding I lead a force to intercept them. Standard protocol." "But?" I heard the unspoken word hanging in the air. "But these aren't normal rogues. They're organized, strategic. Someone's leading them, and whoever it is knows exactly how to strike our weaknesses." His finger traced a path across the map. "They hit the southern packs first. The smaller ones, the vulnerable ones. They're testing our defenses, and when they find the gaps, they'll come here," I finished, understanding dawning with cold certainty. "To the castle." He nodded, his jaw tight. "I have to leave tonight, take the King's Guard, and meet them in open territory before they can reach the civilian populations. But that means leaving the castle with minimal protection. And if this is a diversion, if the real attack is meant to happen here while I'm gone—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I moved to stand beside him at the desk, studying the maps even though military strategy was far beyond my understanding. "How long will you be gone?" "Days, maybe a week." His hand clenched into a fist on the desk. "I hate this. Hate leaving when every instinct tells me there's more happening than we can see." Without thinking, I reached out and touched his arm. The contact sent electricity through my fingertips. The first time I'd deliberately touched him. The first time I'd crossed that invisible boundary between servant and king. He froze, his eyes dropping to where my hand rested on his sleeve. "You'll figure it out," I said quietly, meaning it with every fiber of my being. "You're the Alpha King. You've faced worse than this and survived." "Have I?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "Sometimes I think I've just been running from one battle to the next, never stopping long enough to question why, never asking if there's supposed to be more to existence than constant warfare." "There is," I said. "There has to be." He turned toward me, and suddenly we were standing too close. Close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough that when he lifted his hand and tucked a loose strand of pale hair behind my ear, the gesture felt both impossibly intimate and completely natural. "Alara," he breathed. And my name on his lips sounded like prayer and confession and question all at once. The door exploded inward. We jumped apart as wolves poured into the room, members of the King's Guard, their faces grim with urgency. Behind them came Lady Sienna, her expression a twisted combination of triumph and rage. "Your Majesty," the guard captain said, carefully not looking at me. "We need to move now. Reports say the rogues have changed direction. They're moving faster than anticipated. If we don't intercept them within the next few hours, they'll reach the villages by dawn." Demon's expression shuddered closed, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the mask of the Alpha King. "Gather the guard. We leave in 15 minutes. The wolves scattered to obey, but Sienna remained, her cold eyes fixed on me with predatory focus. "How convenient," she said sweetly. "The king delayed in his chambers while threats approach our borders. One wonders what could have been so distracting." "Sienna." Demon's voice carried enough warning to make her take a step back. "You'll accompany the civilian evacuation to the inner keep. Make yourself useful." "Of course, Your Majesty." She dipped into a mocking curtsy, but her eyes never left mine. "Though I do hope the little maid will be safe while you're gone. It would be tragic if something happened to her in all the chaos." The threat was unmistakable. After they left, Demon turned to me, conflict warring across his features. "You need to stay in the servants' quarters. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't draw attention to yourself. Promise me." "I promise," I said, even as fear coiled in my stomach. He moved toward the door, then stopped, his hand on the frame. For a moment, I thought he might say something more, might voice whatever had been building between us during those stolen conversations. Instead, he simply looked at me one last time, a look that felt like a vow, and then he was gone, taking half the castle's protection with him into the storm-dark night. I stood alone in his empty chamber, the ghost of his touch still tingling behind my ear, and tried not to think about Sienna's smile, or the way the air itself felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for violence to descend. The castle transformed in Demon's absence. What had been busy and structured became tense and watchful, every shadow suddenly suspicious, every sound a potential threat. The servants huddled together in whispered clusters, trading rumors that grew more dire with each retelling. The rogues had destroyed 3 villages. No, 5. No, an entire territory had fallen. Demon and his guard had been ambushed. No, they'd won a decisive victory. No one knew what was true, and the uncertainty was almost worse than confirmed bad news. I tried to follow Demon's instructions, staying close to the other maids, keeping my head down. But on the second night after his departure, Mira shook me awake with urgent hands and fear-bright eyes. "Ilara, you need to leave. Now." I sat up, my heart immediately racing. What's happened? Sienna's been drinking with some of the visiting wolves. I overheard them talking. Mira's voice trembled. "She's convinced them you're a security risk, that you've been using dark magic to manipulate the king's mind. She's talking about having you questioned in the old way." The old way. I'd heard stories about those interrogations. Wolves tearing information from human minds through methods that left survivors broken and hollow. If they survived at all, that's insane, I whispered. "I don't have magic. I'm just a maid. She doesn't care about truth. She wants you gone. And with the king away, there's no one powerful enough to stop her." Mira pressed a small bundle into my hands. Bread, cheese, a water skin. "There's a service tunnel that leads from the kitchens to the outer grounds. Go now, before she comes looking." "Where will I go?" "Anywhere but here." Mira's eyes glistened with tears. "I'm sorry, Ilara. I'm so sorry. This isn't fair." Fair. The word felt laughable. When had life ever been fair to girls like us? I dressed quickly in the dark, braided my hair tight, and followed Mira through corridors I'd walked 1,000 times, but which now felt alien and dangerous. The kitchen was empty at this hour, the fires banked low, the usual chaos replaced by eerie stillness. Mira showed me a narrow door hidden behind the pantry shelves, its surface scarred with age. "Follow the tunnel until you reach the forest edge," she instructed. "Then head east toward the river. There's a village about 10 miles downstream. They might take you in." I hugged her fiercely, this girl who'd risked everything to warn me. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just survive." She pulled back, pressing a small knife into my hand. "And if anyone asks, you left days ago. I never saw you." The tunnel was worse than I'd imagined. Narrow, damp, thick with the smell of earth and decay. I had only a small candle to light my way, its flame guttering in the stale air. My breathing sounded too loud in the enclosed space, and every few steps I had to fight the urge to turn back, to trust that this was all a misunderstanding that could be resolved. But I'd seen Sienna's eyes. There would be no resolution, no mercy. She'd found a convenient excuse to eliminate a rival, and in the chaos of the rogue attacks, who would question one missing human maid? The tunnel seemed to stretch forever, twisting through the earth like a serpent. My candle was burning dangerously low when I finally saw it, a faint square of moonlight ahead, the tunnel's exit. I extinguished the candle and crept forward, every sense straining for signs of danger. The night air hit me like a blessing when I emerged. I found myself at the forest's edge, exactly as Mira had promised, the castle looming behind me like a sleeping giant. I turned east, toward where the river should be, and started walking. I'd made it perhaps 1/2 a mile when I heard the howls, not the organized hunting calls of pack wolves. These were wild, chaotic, edged with madness. The rogues, and they were close, too close. I ran. Branches tore at my clothes and hair as I crashed through the underbrush. My lungs burned, my legs screamed in protest, but terror drove me forward. Behind me, the howls multiplied, drawing closer with each passing second. They'd caught my scent. A ravine opened before me without warning. I tried to stop, my feet skidding on loose dirt, but momentum carried me over the edge. I tumbled down the slope in a painful tangle of limbs and stones, finally slamming to a halt at the bottom. Pain exploded through my ankle, sharp and immediate. I tried to stand and nearly screamed. The ankle wouldn't bear weight. Above me, at the ravine's edge, shapes moved against the moonlight. Large, predatory, moving with the fluid grace of wolves on the hunt. This was it. This was how I died, alone in a ravine, hunted by rogues, because I'd been foolish enough to catch the attention of someone powerful. The wolves descended into the ravine, and as they drew closer, I could see them properly for the first time. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light, their lips pulled back to reveal too many teeth, their bodies bearing scars and wounds that should have killed them, but somehow hadn't. These weren't just rogues. These were something worse, corrupted, twisted by magic that smelled of rot and wrongness. The leader approached, a massive gray wolf whose presence radiated disease and decay. He shifted into human form, revealing a man whose body was covered in black veins that pulsed like they were alive. "Well," he said, his voice a wet rasp, "what do we have here? A little human." All alone in the dark, he inhaled deeply, and covered in the Alpha King's scent. How interesting. I pressed back against the ravine wall. The small knife Mira had given me clutched uselessly in my trembling hand. "Please," I whispered, hating the weakness in my voice but unable to stop it. "I'm no one. I'm just a maid." "No one," he repeated, laughing, a sound like bones breaking. "Oh no, little human. You're exactly who we've been looking for. The king's weakness, delivered right into our hands." Understanding crashed over me like ice water. This wasn't random. The attack on the borders, Demon being lured away, Sienna's sudden campaign against me. It was all connected, all planned. Someone had orchestrated everything to isolate me, to use me as leverage against Demon. "Who's paying you?" I demanded, finding strength in anger. "Who wants the king badly enough to hire corrupted rogues?" The gray wolf's smile widened, revealing black gums. "Such a clever little thing, but you'll have plenty of time to figure that out. Once we deliver you to our employer, I'm sure she'll be happy to explain everything before she—" He never finished the sentence. A blur of black fur exploded from the ravine's edge, slamming into the gray wolf with enough force to send them both rolling. More wolves followed, these ones sleek and powerful, and moving with the coordinated precision of trained fighters. The king's guard, and leading them, larger than all the others, his dark fur gleaming like midnight water, was Demon. What followed was brutal and swift. The king's guard fell upon the rogues with surgical efficiency, cutting them down before they could mount a proper defense. Demon himself was a force of nature, all teeth and claws and terrifying speed. The gray wolf tried to fight back, black veins pulsing with corrupt magic, but Demon ripped into him with the kind of violence that transcended mere battle and became something primal. When it was over, when the last rogue lay still, Demon shifted back to human form. He was covered in blood, some his own, most not. His chest heaving with exertion, his eyes found me immediately, scanning for injuries with an intensity that bordered on frantic. "Ilara," he breathed, and then he was moving, crossing the distance between us in 3 long strides and dropping to his knees beside me. "Are you hurt?" "My ankle," I managed. "I think it's broken." "But Demon, how did you—" "Trap," he said tersely, his hands moving over my ankle with surprising gentleness. The whole border attack was a trap to draw me away. One of my guards suspected, and we turned back. But we were almost too late. His jaw clenched. If we'd been even 10 minutes slower. He didn't finish, but I saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear I'd felt when I thought I was going to die in this ravine. "The gray one said something about an employer," I said. "About delivering me to she." Demon, I think someone in the castle is working with the rogues. His expression turned thunderous. I know exactly who it is. He lifted me carefully, cradling me against his chest as if I weighed nothing. Around us, his guard had shifted back to human form, forming a protective circle. They looked at me with curiosity, and something that might have been respect. I'd survived long enough for them to find me. And in their world, survival mattered. Take me back, I said. Please. I need to face this. Demon looked down at me, conflict warring in his features. Alara, she tried to have you killed. If I take you back to that castle, then you'll be there to stop her from trying again, I finished. And I refused to run. I refused to let her win by making me disappear. Something fierce and proud flashed in his eyes. You're braver than most wolves I know. No, I said quietly. I'm just tired of being invisible. He carried me through the forest, back toward the castle that had become both sanctuary and battleground, and with each step, I felt something inside me crystallize into determination. Sienna had tried to destroy me, had used hatred and jealousy and corruption to tear down someone she viewed as beneath her notice. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd assumed I'd break easily, and she'd forgotten that even the invisible, when finally seen, cast shadows that can swallow kingdoms whole. The castle was in chaos when we returned. Word of the rogue attack had spread, and wolves prowled the corridors with weapons drawn, their eyes wild with the aftermath of adrenaline and violence. Demon carried me through the main entrance rather than the servants' tunnels, a deliberate choice that sent a clear message to everyone who saw us. The Alpha King, bloodied from battle, cradling a human maid in his arms as if she were the most precious thing in his world. The whispers started immediately. He took me directly to his chambers, ignoring the stares and muttered conversations that followed in our wake. Inside, he set me carefully on his bed, the same bed I'd made dozens of times, now feeling impossibly foreign beneath me. A healer was summoned, an elderly wolf woman named Thessa, who examined my ankle with efficient, no-nonsense movements. Badly sprained, not broken, she announced. Keep weight off it for a week. Use this salve twice daily. She handed me a small jar that smelled of herbs and something sharper. You're lucky, girl. Most humans wouldn't have survived what you went through tonight. After she left, Demon paced the room like a caged animal. Too much energy and nowhere to put it. He'd cleaned the blood off, but his shirt was still torn, revealing glimpses of the hard muscle beneath. I tried not to stare. Tell me everything, he said finally. From the beginning. What happened after I left? I told him about Mira's warning, about Sienna's accusations of dark magic, about the tunnel and the ravine and the gray wolf's words about an employer. With each detail, Demon's expression grew darker, more dangerous. By the time I finished, I could see the wolf rising behind his eyes, that part of him that solved problems with teeth and claws. She tried to have you executed based on fabricated charges, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Then, when you escaped, she sent corrupted rogues to hunt you down, all to eliminate what she perceived as competition for my attention. It's more than that, though, isn't it? I said. The rogues were too organized, too prepared. Someone's been planning this for a long time. Using Sienna's jealousy as a cover for something bigger, he stopped pacing and looked at me with something like wonder. You see it too. The pattern beneath the chaos. I'm good at noticing things, I said quietly. It's what invisible people do. We watch, we listen, we see the connections others miss because they're too busy being seen. A knock interrupted us. Sharp, authoritative. Demon's captain of the guard entered without waiting for permission, his face grim. Your Majesty, we have her. Lady Sienna. She was attempting to flee through the eastern gate with 2 trunks of gold and jewelry. When we stopped her, she attacked the guards. He paused. We had to restrain her forcibly. Bring her to the throne room, Demon commanded. Gather the council. It's time for truth. He turned to me, conflict evident in his features. You should rest. Your ankle. I'm coming with you, I said firmly. This started because of me. I need to see it through. Ilara, the throne room during a formal accusation is no place for what? A human? A servant? I met his eyes steadily. You're the one who told me you specifically requested me because I see the person instead of the king. Well, the person I see right now is trying to protect me by keeping me locked away like something fragile. But I'm not fragile, demon. I survived tonight because I refused to break. Don't make me invisible again by leaving me behind. The silence stretched between us, taut as a drawn bowstring. Then slowly he smiled, a real smile. Warm and genuine and absolutely transforming. You're right, he said. Forgive me. I'm not accustomed to having someone challenge me. Then it's probably good for you, I replied. And he laughed. An actual laugh that sounded rusty from disuse, but utterly genuine. He helped me to my feet, supporting most of my weight as we made our way to the throne room. The great hall was already filling with wolves. Members of the council, visiting dignitaries who'd remained during the crisis, high-ranking pack members all murmuring amongst themselves about the unprecedented midnight gathering. They fell silent when Demon entered, their eyes tracking our joined progress to the raised platform where his throne sat. He settled me on a chair beside the throne. Not behind it, not hidden in the shadows, but right there in full view of everyone. The statement was unmistakable, and I heard the sharp intake of breath from multiple sources. A human, seated at the Alpha King's right hand during formal proceedings. Unheard of, scandalous, perfect. Lady Sienna was dragged in moments later, her elaborate hairstyle now disheveled, her green dress torn and dirty. But her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, burned with unrepentant fury. She didn't look defeated. She looked like a cornered predator preparing for one final strike. Lady Sienna of the Eastern Territories. Demon's voice rang through the hall, carrying the full weight of his authority. You stand accused of conspiracy to murder, of hiring corrupted rogues to attack a member of this household, and of treason against the crown. How do you answer? Treason? Sienna laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. I acted to protect you, Your Majesty. That human, she spat the word like poison, has been using dark magic to cloud your judgment, to make you forget your duty to find a proper mate, to produce heirs who can actually shift and defend our territories. I did what needed to be done. By hiring rogues corrupted by blood magic, Demon's voice could have frozen fire. By orchestrating an attack that killed 17 wolves and destroyed 2 villages? By attempting to murder an innocent woman whose only crime was being kind to me? Innocent? Sienna's laugh grew more unhinged. She's a human, Demon. They're all the same. Weak, manipulative, using their fragility to make us forget what we are. Your father would be ashamed to see you sitting there with that pale-haired little mouse beside you like she means something. I saw Demon flinch at the mention of his father. That wound still raw despite the years. And in that moment, I understood the full depth of what Sienna had been counting on, that Demon's childhood conditioning, those brutal lessons about strength and dominance and the weakness of affection, would ultimately override whatever connection we'd built. She'd underestimated him. My father, Demon said quietly, dangerously, was a tyrant who ruled through fear and died alone, unmourned by anyone. He taught me that power came from isolation, that caring about others made you vulnerable. And for years, I believed him. I built walls so high that nothing and no one could reach me. I became exactly what he wanted, a weapon with a crown. He stood, descending from the throne to stand directly before Sienna. Then a woman with pale hair and gentle hands walked into my life by accident, and she saw something in me I'd forgotten existed. Not the Alpha King, not the weapon, just a person. Someone lonely and tired and desperate for a single genuine connection in a world of calculated allegiances. His eyes found mine across the hall, and the tenderness in them made my breath catch. She showed me that strength isn't about dominating others. It's about having the courage to be vulnerable, to let yourself be seen fully, to choose compassion, even when fear tells you to choose violence. He turned back to Sienna, and all tenderness evaporated. You tried to destroy that because you can't understand it, because you're so consumed by ambition that you've forgotten what it means to actually connect with another being. And in your jealousy, you allied yourself with forces that would have destroyed everything we've built. Prove it, Sienna snarled. You have no evidence that We have your correspondence, the guard captain interrupted. stepping forward with a leather satchel. Found in your chambers. Letters detailing payment to the rogue leader, plans for the border attack, instructions for disposing of the human Maid. All in your handwriting, Lady Sienna. All sealed with your family crest. The color drained from Sienna's face. Around the room, I heard gasps and angry muttering from the assembled wolves. Conspiracy was one thing, but documented treason was something else entirely. There's more, the captain continued, his voice grim. The rogue leader, before he died, confirmed that Lady Sienna had been his contact for months. She'd been feeding information about patrol routes, weak points in our defenses, all in exchange for their assistance in eliminating her romantic rival. "I did it for us!" Sienna screamed, her composure finally shattering. "For our people. We can't have a human queen, demon. We can't let them think we've gone soft, that we'll accept their weakness into our bloodlines. I was trying to save you from making the biggest mistake of your life." The throne room erupted in chaos. Some wolves shouting agreement with Sienna's prejudices, others calling for her immediate punishment. The noise building to a deafening crescendo that made my head spin. Demon raised one hand, and silence fell like a physical thing. "Alara," he said, and every eye in the room turned to me. "Stand." My heart hammered against my ribs as I rose carefully, putting minimal weight on my injured ankle. I'd never felt more exposed, more scrutinized, more utterly terrified in my life. Hundreds of wolves staring at me with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt to barely concealed hostility. Demon crossed to me, taking my hand in his. The gesture sent another wave of shocked murmurs through the crowd. "This woman," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "has shown more courage, intelligence, and genuine strength in the past week than most of you will demonstrate in your entire lives. She survived an assassination plot, escaped into hostile territory with a broken ankle, and held on long enough for rescue despite being hunted by corrupted rogues. She did all of this, not because she has supernatural strength or centuries of life experience, but because she refused to give up, because she chose to survive." He turned to face the assembled council, me still beside him. "I've spent my entire reign trying to live up to my father's example, cold, distant, unmoved by emotional considerations. I thought that was what leadership required, but I was wrong. True strength isn't about building walls. It's about having the courage to tear them down." "Your Majesty," one of the older council members spoke up, his voice careful, "we understand your affection for this human. But surely you see the complications. A human queen cannot defend our borders, cannot shift, cannot bear wolf cubs. The practical considerations alone are irrelevant," Demon interrupted, "because I'm not asking for your approval. I'm informing you of my decision. Alara will remain at my side in whatever capacity she chooses. If that means as my mate and future queen, then you'll accept it, or find yourselves answering the same treason charges as Lady Sienna." The threat hung in the air like drawn steel. Several council members looked like they wanted to argue further, but the expression on Demon's face, that perfect blend of wolf and king and absolute authority, kept them silent. "As for the accusations of weakness," Demon continued, "let me be clear. Any wolf who views compassion as weakness, who thinks ruling through fear is the only path to strength, can challenge me directly, right here, right now. I'll be happy to demonstrate exactly how weak I've become." No one moved. No one spoke. Even the most prejudiced among them weren't foolish enough to challenge the Alpha King in direct combat. Demon turned to Sienna, and his voice dropped to something cold and final. "Lady Sienna, you are hereby stripped of your title and lands. You'll be exiled to the northern wastes, where you'll spend the remainder of your considerably long life thinking about the consequences of betraying your king. Guards, remove her." As they dragged Sienna away, screaming threats and curses that echoed off the stone walls, I felt the full weight of what had just happened settle over me like a physical thing. Demon had just publicly declared his intention to make me his mate, had threatened the entire council on my behalf, had fundamentally altered the political landscape of his kingdom, for me. A chambermaid with pale hair and no family name worth mentioning. The throne room slowly emptied, wolves filing out in clusters of whispered conversation. Some shot me looks of hostility, others curiosity. A few, surprisingly, something that might have been grudging respect. When the last of them had gone, when it was just Demon and me and the vast empty hall, I finally let myself sag against him. "That was terrifying," I whispered. "I know." His arms came around me, steady and warm. "I'm sorry. I should have warned you. Should have prepared you better." "No," I interrupted. "I meant terrifying in a good way, like standing at the edge of something huge and unknown and choosing to jump anyway." He pulled back to look at me, his amber eyes searching my face. "You understand what I just did, the implications? You declared war on centuries of prejudice and tradition because you refused to let the past dictate the future," I said. "And you did it publicly, in a way that can't be taken back or quietly swept aside. I did it because the alternative was losing you," he said simply. "And that's not something I'm willing to accept. Not now, not ever." The words hung between us, heavy with meaning that went far beyond political maneuvering or strategic declarations. This was something real, something that had grown from accidental meetings and careful conversations and the slow recognition of two lonely people finding understanding in each other. "I need to ask you something," Demon said quietly, "and I need you to answer honestly, without worrying about what you think I want to hear." "All right. Do you want this? Being at my side, dealing with the politics and dangers and constant scrutiny that comes with that position? Because if you don't, if you'd rather return to a quieter life somewhere safe, I'll make it happen. I'll set you up anywhere you choose, with enough resources to live comfortably. You'll never have to work as a servant again. Never have to worry about—" I stopped him with a finger pressed gently to his lips. "Do you remember what you asked me, if I enjoyed my work?" He nodded. "I told you I appreciated the solitude, the peace of being alone with my thoughts, and that was true. Then. But Demon, I've spent my entire life being invisible, watching from the shadows while others lived in the light. And yes, it was safe. Yes, it was peaceful. But it was also hollow." I took his hand, pressing it against my chest where my heart hammered with fear and hope and something that felt terrifyingly close to love. "These past days with you, being seen, being heard, being treated like I matter, that's what living actually feels like. And I don't want to go back to just existing. I want to jump off that terrifying edge and see what happens." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. "Then jump with me." He kissed me then, not the careful political kiss of arranged mates, but something real and raw and filled with months of loneliness, finally finding relief. I kissed him back with everything I had, pouring all my fear and hope and defiant courage into that single point of connection. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "There's still so much to figure out. The Council will resist. Some territories might rebel. There will be challenges and complications I can't even predict yet." "Good," I said. "I've had enough of predictable. Let's try impossible instead." He laughed, that rusty, genuine sound that was becoming less rare each day. "Impossible it is." The following weeks were a whirlwind of change that left me breathless. Demon kept his word. I remained at his side through council meetings, diplomatic functions, strategy sessions with his military advisors. Not as a silent ornament, but as a participant whose opinions were solicited and respected. It didn't win me friends among the more traditional wolves, but it earned me something more valuable. Acknowledgement that I belonged there. Mira visited me frequently in my new chambers. Rooms adjoining Demon's own, decorated with elegant simplicity that felt more like home than anywhere I'd ever lived. She'd been promoted to head housemaid, a position she'd earned through years of competent service, but which Demon freely admitted was also a reward for protecting me when it mattered most. "You've caused quite the scandal," she said one afternoon, helping me into a dress made of deep blue silk that probably cost more than I'd earned in my entire life as a servant. "Half the territories think Demon's lost his mind. The other half are taking bets on how long you'll survive the political infighting." "Encouraging," I said dryly. "But," Mira continued with a grin, "there are also humans starting to apply for positions in the castle. Regular positions, not just servants. A few have even been accepted into diplomatic training. You being here, being visible, It's changing things. The weight of that responsibility settled over me like a physical thing. I'd never asked to be a symbol, never wanted to represent anything beyond myself. But intention didn't matter when visibility made you a lightning rod for change. Demon found me later that evening standing on the balcony of my chambers, watching the forest stretch into darkness. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on top of my head. "Thinking too much again?" he asked. "Wondering if I'm enough," I admitted. "If one human woman with no special powers or ancient bloodline can actually make a difference in a world of immortal wolves, you already have," he said quietly. "You taught me that strength comes in forms we're not trained to recognize. That the ability to choose kindness over cruelty, hope over despair, connection over isolation, that's a power that outlasts any supernatural ability." I turned in his arms, looking up at this man, this king, who'd walked into the wrong room and changed both our lives irrevocably. "What happens now? Now?" His smile was soft and full of promise. "Now we figure it out together. We build something new from the ruins of old prejudices. We prove that different doesn't mean weak, that change isn't something to fear, but something to embrace." "That sounds exhausting." "Probably," he agreed, "but I can't think of anyone I'd rather be exhausted with." I laughed, rising on my toes to kiss him properly. "You're very bad at romantic declarations." "I'm working on it," he murmured against my lips. "Give me a few centuries, and I might get good at this." Later that night, as I lay in Demon's arms watching moonlight paint patterns across the ceiling, I thought about my mother's words. "How you treat the unseen says everything about your heart." She'd been talking about kindness toward others, but maybe it worked in reverse too. Maybe how you responded when someone finally saw you, really saw you, said something equally important about courage and worth and the choice to claim your place in the world. I'd spent 19 years invisible, moving through a world that didn't register my existence. And then one night, a king walked into the wrong room and looked at me like I was the only person who'd ever mattered, not because of magic or destiny or any grand cosmic plan. Simply because in that moment, two lonely people recognized each other. The wind carried the scent of pine and possibility through the open window. Somewhere in the castle, wolves prowled and plotted and whispered about the scandal of the human girl who'd captured the Alpha King's heart. Let them whisper. Let them plot. I was done being invisible. And this time, when the world looked at me, I would look right back, with Demon beside me, his hand in mine, both of us choosing to jump off that terrifying edge into whatever impossible future awaited. Together.